We all kind of grow up with this idea that a deep, intense, passionate love is all you need for a relationship to last forever. But what if that's not really the whole story? What if the very power of our feelings can sometimes actually set us up for failure? Let's get into the science of what really makes a bond last.
And this is where things get really interesting. There's this study that found a strange paradox. The people who feel the most love, the ones who are the most excited, well, they tend to make the biggest, most ambitious promises. They get swept up, right? They want to promise their partner the entire world. But here's the catch. Making a promise and keeping a promise are two totally different things. That feeling of love is what inspires the promise, but it's stuff like self-control and just plain conscientiousness that actually determines if you follow through.
So, okay, that brings up a huge question, right? If that overwhelming, I love you so much I can't breathe feeling isn't the superglue that holds a relationship together when things get tough, then what is? Well, to figure that out, we first have to look at how relationships can quietly, almost silently, start to fall apart. So let's dive into some of the most common ways that emotional disconnection happens. And you should know it's almost never one big, dramatic event. It's usually more like a slow, quiet erosion that can happen over months or even years. A really powerful example of this is something researchers call walk-away wife syndrome. Now, it describes a situation where one partner feels like their needs just aren't being met over and over again, so they start to emotionally check out. They might stop trying to have deep talks or plan date nights. Now, to the other partner, everything might seem fine, maybe even peaceful. But in reality, an exit plan is slowly taking shape. And get this, it's not a sudden impulse. It's the final step in a very long journey. It actually helps explain why almost 2/3 of all divorces in the US are initiated by women.
And in our hyper-digital world, disconnection can look a little different. It can look like breadcrumbing. You've probably seen this. It's when someone sends you just enough, a random text here, a like on a photo there, maybe a vague mention of, we should hang out sometime. Just enough to keep your hope alive, but with zero real intention of following through. It's the ultimate way to keep someone on the hook with the absolute minimum amount of effort.
And here's the crazy part. Here's why breadcrumbing is so effective. It taps into something in our brains called intermittent reinforcement. It is literally the exact same principle that makes slot machines so addictive. Because the reward, that little text message, that tiny bit of attention, is completely unpredictable, our brain gets this huge rush of dopamine when it finally shows up. And that creates this powerful, addictive cycle of hope and letdown that keeps us chasing that next tiny breadcrumb of attention. So whether we're talking about that slow fade-out or the addictive cycle of breadcrumbing, when these kinds of disconnection become the new normal in a relationship, they can create really toxic communication habits. And here's the scary part. Researchers have found some of these habits can predict the end of a relationship with terrifying accuracy. The legendary researcher Dr. John Gottman actually calls these patterns the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. Seriously. The first is criticism. And that's not just a complaint, it's an attack on your partner's core character. Then you have contempt. Think sarcasm, eye-rolling, name-calling. That one is the single biggest predictor of divorce. The third is defensiveness, which is really just a way of turning the blame back on your partner. And finally, stonewalling. That's when one person just completely shuts down and withdraws. But here's the good news. For every one of these horsemen, there's an antidote. For example, instead of criticism, you can use a gentle startup where you talk about your own feelings using I statements. And instead of getting defensive, you can try to take responsibility for even a tiny part of the problem. These small shifts can literally change everything. Okay, so if we know what breaks relationships, how do we build them to last? Well, the answer really lies in the science of attachment. It's like this hidden blueprint that shapes how we connect with everyone in our lives. This blueprint, our attachment style, is formed way back in our childhoods, and it follows us right into our adult relationships. If you have a secure attachment style, you're generally pretty comfortable with getting close to people, and you can balance that intimacy with your own independence. On the other hand, an insecure attachment style often looks one of two ways. Either anxious, where you're constantly afraid of being abandoned, or avoidant, where you're actually scared of closeness and try to keep people at a distance. Just starting to understand your own pattern is a huge first step toward building a more secure connection. Psychologist Dr. Sue Johnson, who's a total pioneer in this field, says that all of our complicated relationship issues, all the fights and the fears, they all boil down to this one simple, primal question that we are constantly subconsciously asking our partners: are you there for me? This question is the absolute core of our need for a secure bond.
So how do we actually answer that question for our partners? Dr. Johnson has this great model called ARE. The A is for accessible. Can my partner actually get my attention? R is for responsive. Can they rely on me to respond to their emotional needs? And E is for engaged. Am I truly present with them? When the answer to these three questions is a consistent, resounding yes, that's when you create a bond that's strong enough to get through pretty much anything.
All right, let's get practical. How does this actually look in our day-to-day lives? Because it's really not about the big, grand romantic gestures. It's all about the tiny, everyday moments.
Dr. Gottman calls these moments bids for connection. And a bid can be literally anything. It could be your partner saying, "Wow, check out that sunset," or just sighing really heavily after a long day. It could even be a little touch on the arm. Every single one of these is a small opportunity, like a sliding door moment, where you can either turn towards your partner and connect or turn away.
And the data on this, well, it's just staggering. In his lab, Gottman found he could divide couples into two groups, the masters of relationships and the disasters. The masters, these are the couples who were still happily married years later. They turned towards their partner's bids for connection 86% of the time. The disasters, the couples who ended up breaking up, only turned towards those bids 33% of the time. That huge gap, the difference between success and failure, is built entirely in those small, seemingly meaningless moments.
And if that wasn't enough, Gottman also found this other piece of relationship math. He calls it the magic ratio. He discovered that for every one negative interaction a couple has during a conflict, stable and happy couples have at least 5 positive interactions. Those positive moments, a quick touch, sharing a laugh, saying thank you, they build up this emotional bank account that keeps the whole relationship strong even when things get really hard.
Okay, so let's pull all these pieces together. Building a love that actually lasts isn't about never fighting or having these perfect, intense feelings 24/7. It's about a consistent daily practice of choosing to connect. So here are 4 core practices that really stand out from all the research. First, practice self-awareness. Get to know your own attachment style, what triggers you. Second, communicate openly and honestly. Learn how to say what you need and how to really listen without just planning your comeback. Third, offer consistent and reliable support. Just be the person your partner knows without a doubt they can count on. And finally, learn to regulate your emotions. Know how to calm yourself down when you get upset so you can stay in the conversation instead of shutting down or blowing up.
When you look at all the science, it shows us that lasting love isn't some feeling you just fall into. It's a verb. It's something you do, moment by moment, day after day. So the question I want to leave you with is this: what is one small way you can turn towards someone you care about today?